All right, and we are rolling. Just kind of running at it. We are about the labor. I am a new host, Kirby O'Connor. Oh, Sean's joining. We have a live Sean.
Just in time, man.
We just
started.
What's
happening? Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
Perfect. Yes, I am Kirby O'Connor, managing editor of PurplePTSD.com. New co-host to this exciting show that I'm probably not qualified to be a part of, but joining me tonight is Sean. Introduce yourself, Sean. Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm Sean Borman, managing editor of Vikings Territory. Good to be here. Can't wait. Good to see you again, Nick.
You too, Sean.
Yeah, and also joining us, Nick Olson.
What's up, guys?
Exciting Twitter aficionado. If you're on Vikings Twitter, you know who he is probably. Anyways, okay, let's run right at it because Nick is in a bit of a hurry. Let's run at 53-man roster predictions. Nick, I saw yours on Twitter not more than like 3 hours ago, and I thought there was some interesting things right off the bat. First of all, you picked Mannion over Sloter.
Yes, I did. Sloter is obviously the preseason GOAT, but I think based off Zimmer's comments in the presser this past week and the fact that Sloter hasn't managed to crack past the third string in his couple of years here, I think the writing is on the wall that, if he hasn't learned it by this point, he's an old dog and he's not going to learn any new tricks. So I don't really see, with some depth at a lot of other positions, the need to carry three quarterbacks if we're pretty sure that the third one isn't going to be able to run the actual offense.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, we all get excited about Sloter when he gets in the preseason. He's got a few wins under his belt in the preseason, but like you said, he's just not, there's some sort of disconnect between him and the coaching staff. Otherwise, he would have found his way onto the roster, especially, with he looks like a better quarterback than Trevor Siemian, but there's obviously something between the ears that last year that kept him out over, instead of Siemian.
Yeah, and it's not even like an IQ type thing. It's just there's so much that happens pre-snap with a quarterback. They're irresponsible for getting everyone on the line, making all the checks, communicating to everybody, and that's stuff that on the broadcast you generally don't see unless you're really paying close attention. But what we've heard is that Mannion is a guy who's really great at the whiteboard, was really good in McVay's system last year. They really like him at that, and he's fine post-snap. He doesn't have Sloter's athleticism, but I guess Sloter just hasn't really put it together in terms of actually affecting the playbook on the field. So that is a big deal, but it doesn't really show if you're just watching the preseason games and seeing Sloter lead these awesome comebacks and throwing touchdowns.
Yeah, and I think just your point about him Mannion essentially knowing how to run an offense is kind of, if we see Kirk Cousins go down at any point in the season, I would much rather have a guy who's going to run the offense, keep us in the game, essentially manage the game and rely on the defense rather than a guy who doesn't exactly know what he's doing and might make a few mistakes out there, might make a wrong call. All of a sudden we turn the ball over deep in our own territory, what have you. Sean, do you have any feelings about Sloter, Mannion? I assume you're on the same wavelength as us.
I'm actually a big fan of Sloter. Do I think he'll be the number 2 this year? No, I don't. But I think it's closer than it seems. I think Zimmer's comments yesterday kind of shed some light on it. It's just a little nuances that he hasn't quite picked up on yet, which is unfortunate because he's been around for a few years now, and I think the team was really high on him when they picked him up from Denver and, stashed him on the practice squad. Or took him from Denver's practice squad, I should say. But I think he's really close. He obviously can pull it off in games, and what more do you really want from a quarterback than a guy who can do it when it matters most, under pressure. And I would love to see him get more opportunities because I don't know, from a actual game standpoint, what more he can prove He's done great in opportunities that he's been given, and I definitely feel like, he should be getting some more opportunities. I don't know how that's going to work, but man, it's frustrating, isn't it? I mean, he just balls out in the preseason, and I would just love to see him get some more opportunities. He's capable of running this offense. He's fantastic. He's quicker than people realize. On his feet, he's actually pretty dangerous. So I think that's an advantage in this offense. And he's got a cannon of an arm. He makes those post throws look like button hooks. It's just no problem with his cannon of an arm. So we'll see what happens, but I still am very high on Sloter and his potential. I just want to see him get in there somehow.
Yeah, I think even if he's cut from the Vikings, I think he'll get a chance somewhere else this year. He'll find his way somewhere by mid-season when somebody's hurting for quarterback a talent somewhere. Okay, moving down onto the running back positions. Nick, right here, you have 5 backs making it, but you specify specifically 5 backs. Because you have Dalvin Cook, Alexander Mattison, Mike Boone, C.J. Ham, and Blazing Game all making the roster. And would you like to explain, just give a brief explanation of that?
Yeah, I don't think 5 backs is all that much. We kept 5 last year, and that was when we weren't planning on running a lot of 21 personnel, a fullback on the field. We weren't planning on lining our running backs out wide very often. So I think, and Zimmer mentioned in a presser the other week that he was talking to Spielman, and they were talking about the possibility of keeping 6 backs. So I really think 5 is not a lot. I think maybe the surprising thing I'm doing here is I'm suggesting keeping both fullbacks. But I really see C.J. Ham and Kari Blasingame as like 2 completely different players. Blasingame is almost like a tight end who's just short. But he's almost like an H-back, and he's really good in the passing game, but I don't think you'd really want to hand the ball off to him very often, and he's not the guy you would want on like 3rd and short. That's CJ. If you're doing like a 3rd and short, just want a bruiser to power through the line, then I think that's C.J. Ham. I think Ham's a better runner and has a little better vision. Blasingame's like a late convert to the position. I think he was a halfback in college. So the fullback is a little bit different for him, and he wasn't a very good runner in college. From what I've heard, I didn't watch his tape in college, but Blasingame's just a very effective receiving weapon, and I think they have like such different skill sets that they're both worth keeping, even though they won't be. It's rare to most teams don't roster one fullback, so it would be it'd catch some headlines to have 2 of them on the roster. But with how much 21 personnel we've seen from Stefanski and Kubiak's office this preseason, I think they would both definitely be seeing a lot of snaps. And then Cook obviously is the bell cow, and Madison they're really high on as a rotational back. I think he's got great vision. He's really good. If Cook is like the outside zone guy, then Madison is the inside zone guy duo for shorter runs, short yardage situations. He's the kind of like the Taylor Murray replacement. And then Mike Boone, it's really an interesting battle going on between Abdullah and Boone. Abdullah's a really talented player in a lot of ways. He's a really interesting scat back. He's like a really good running back too. And I think he's good enough to play for other teams. And he's a fantastic special teams player. He's a fantastic kick returner. He's really fast. He's really elusive. So there's a lot of things to like about him. But the fumbles is just it was an issue in college. It was an issue with the Lions, and it's been an issue so far with the Vikings. And I saw today that he had another unforced fumble today, which is just, man, it's hard to justify a roster spot to somebody who you don't know if they're going to be coughing up the ball in situations, unless it's like Adrian Peterson. And even Abdullah his problem is even worse than Adrian Peterson's it was, or is, I should say. So he doesn't have anything special. Mike Boone, on the other hand, we saw that really dynamic run last week against in the first game of the season against the Saints, and then against the Seahawks we saw that 44-yard reception. And Mike Boone's a converted wide receiver, so he really, for an offense that has lined up a back out wide, like on 10% of snaps in the offense, that is something that really I think would be appealing to Stefanski and to the desire to be multiple. So I really think Mike Boone offers a lot of things, and I think he also offers some value on special teams. He can be the second kick returner after Badette. So I like what a lot of these backs do, and based on how much we're using the backs with all the 21 personnel, I think it makes a lot of sense to keep 5 of them.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think we've seen a lot more from Mike Boone than I think anybody would have expected. Like last year, we saw it a little bit in preseason, but we also saw Rock Thomas go for like 100 yards receiving on 2 like really well run screens. I mean, obviously, like I thought Boone was going to be good and was going to hold be able to hold a roster spot, maybe get a few snaps. But just watching him this preseason and pointing to the play that you referenced this week, that reception where he catches the ball a little bit behind him, makes a man miss, shakes, changes direction. It was such a great play for like a receiving back, and it's the kind of play that I'm not sure that even like Dalvin Cook makes. Like Mike Boone is an exceptional, well, not exceptional by league standards, but at least for like a backup running back, he's a very good receiving back, and I think that sets him apart from the rest of the roster. So
you really see the skill from a converted wide receiver, and the other thing that really sets him apart is he's just an absurd athlete. And I know the Vikings go after a lot of athletes, but Mike Boone's like on another level. I think his broad jump was like almost 11 feet, like off the charts, crazy explosiveness and long speed and good quickness numbers. So you saw that all on that 44-yard reception last week. So he offers a lot of things that other players don't. And when you see an athlete like that start to put it together as a runner, you see him find cutback lanes, show vision, set up linebackers for blocks. You get really excited over the kind of upside and potential someone like that could have.
Exactly. Okay, let's move back. Keep moving down. For your receivers, you kept 5 on here. Dave Thielen, obviously, Chad Beebe, Olabisi Johnson, and Jeff Badette. And I think Badette is the one that people are going to be, they're going to shake their heads, scratch their heads a little bit, but I think you have a very good reasoning here on this one.
Yeah, this is probably the one I'm least confident in because I think a lot of these wide receivers are neck and neck, and I think Zimmer even said that today, or maybe it was Stefanski who said it in a presser, that they're all kind of in the same tier with each other, and so it really comes down to special teams. That makes me think is Badette, because if Abdullah isn't making the roster, then Badette probably should, because those are really your best. They're in a tier of their own as kick returners. Punt returning is a little bit different of a skill, and I think Beebe is better there. But as a kick returner, Badette's obviously, his 4.3 speed sets him apart, and he shows good vision. He had 3 returns, and none of them were like touchdown returns or anything, but he showed good vision. He set up his blocks well. He found cutback lanes, so he offers a little bit in terms of special teams. And also, his speed is a bit of a wild card. We saw him used on that red zone jet sweep last week where he got, I think, like 9 yards or something. It was a good run. But that's also, he's a tiny guy, like 175 pounds or something. But for a wide receiver, obviously, that's big for a normal human being. But for an NFL wide receiver, that's on the smaller side. But he's been a really good blocker in the preseason, which I've been kind of surprised. I sort of expected nothing, and he's been above average there, at least for a preseason player. So that's good to see it and bodes well for him. Obviously, he's not as productive as a receiver as Zylstra has been, and I think Zylstra is kind of a surprise cut here. I think they would like to stash him on the practice squad and call him up if they can. But I think, that's probably the toughest cut for them to make is I don't think they're keeping 6 wide receivers because, they've been in heavier personnel. They've only had 2 wide receivers on the field for about 2/3 of their plays this preseason. So they're really looking like a Kyle Shanahan type offense. So you're going to be using less wide receivers. And if that's the case, it probably doesn't make sense to keep 6 like, most other teams do. So I think that's the toughest cut. And I think Badette gets in there because his speed, his deep threat, you could see him replacing Aldrick Robinson's production a little bit. And he does something on special teams that I don't think the other guys do.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think a lot of people were expecting to see Jordan Taylor get a lot more snaps than he has and maybe a little bit of opportunity to return punts like he has in the past. But he just hasn't found the field. That's the surprising one to me because of the way he was talked up in OTAs and the way it kind of seemed like they were ready to put him in the competition for wide receiver 3, and you get to the preseason and he's not even sniffing the field until, after a bunch of other guys have played. He's essentially in the 6 to 7 range as far as the preseason roster goes. So that's a surprising one to me, but to me with the hype. But also I did write a piece about how I thought it was very unlikely that he was going to make the roster, and I was told that I was going to be wrong by a lot of people. So I feel validated.
He's familiar with the system, but he's like, the problem with him is he's like 6'5", 6'6", but he moves like he's like this real thin, tiny. He's like 6'5", but like 180 pounds, which is like super thin. So usually a guy who's like 6'5", you want him to be like your ex possession receiver, and he can win at the catch point, but he can't separate, and he gets moved off his line in the stem of his routes, and it's kind of a not great mesh up of skills. So I wasn't really impressed with him as a receiver from what I've seen. I think he's good enough to play in the NFL, but I just don't think in a kind of a crowded competition he's been standing out. So.
Yeah, and speaking of not standing out, you do not have Laquan Treadwell on here, but I don't think it's surprising to anybody.
No. And you know what? I think Laquan Treadwell is one of the better receivers on the roster. I think if you were ranking this by pure talent, Treadwell's probably a better receiver than Zylstra or Bidet or anyone, but I just think Stefanski's kind of over him. So.
You think anybody will trade for him? Or you think that they'll just wait till he gets cut so they can get him for free?
They know they can get him for free. So.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Sean, any thoughts on the receiver position and that whole situation?
Well, you guys kind of covered it there. It's kind of a crapshoot after the top 4 now, because I guess you got to throw BC in with BB, Thielen, and Diggs. So I personally think that it's very close between Bidet and Zylstra, just like Nick was saying. But if there's somebody who gets released off another NFL roster, that could be the route that the Vikings choose to go with a wide receiver 5, and particularly somebody who can return as well. And I think kind of a wild card too is it's kind of random to bring him up right now, but Mike Hughes, once he's healthy, will he go back to returning kicks? I don't know. I would rather not see that for a little while, but maybe that's an option later on.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting if they rushed him back and then they immediately were like, all right, your first kick returner. It'd be incredibly
now that you're back from your knee surgery or whatever, let's have some guys running at you full force and tackling you in the open field.
So maybe if they can find somebody who can return kicks for this year, I think that makes the most sense.
I think Mike Boone could potentially do it, but I think Bidet and Abdullah are the two best at it, so there are options.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on to the tight ends, you've got here Kyle Rudolph, Irv Smith Jr., those are the obvious ones, Tyler Conklin, and I cannot pronounce this name.
Cole Hikutini.
Cole Hikutini. All right, and you have a note here, David Morgan to the physically unable to perform list, and he'll replace Hikutini once he's healthy. I think this one's pretty cut and dry as well. It's pretty obvious, I think.
Yeah, I think they really want to use their tight ends a lot. They've used a lot of 12 personnel in the preseason, and this has been a point of emphasis in Kubiak systems for a while now. And I think they really like the guys they have, and we've heard a lot of good things about all 6 tight ends in camp. So I think Hikutini is going to get a shot on the active 53 when they go into the season, and then David Morgan will get a shot once he's activated off the PUP list. So I think they're really happy. Obviously, Kyle Rudolph is, they're starting inline tight end, and Irv Smith, they really want to move around and use in a lot of different ways. Hikutini kind of has the movement skills, I guess, to be a receiving weapon. It'll be interesting to see how they use him if he does earn a roster spot. And then Conklin has really, I think, made a leap from where he was last year. Last year, I wasn't really impressed with him as a tight end, but it seems like he's really starting to put it together. So it's exciting to see like some legitimate depth there at the position.
Yeah, it's good. I don't know. It's always interesting to me to watch tight ends because you never know what you're getting coming out of the draft. And so far, Irv Smith Jr. He's looked great to me. There's been a few plays where I'm like, I don't know what you were doing there, but for the most part, he seems to be strong enough that he can handle himself on blocking, and his routes look very, very crisp and very polished for a rookie.
Yeah, he's. I've been impressed with his blocking, especially in space, which is a tough assignment. It looks easier on film. It is, but like blocking a moving target is a tough thing to do, and he's done a good job of it. So that obviously opens up a lot of things you can do with screens and with sweeps and with all sorts of different outside type runs or short passes. So that's fun.
Yeah, and then moving on to the
I just said a couple.
Oh yeah,
I'm just gonna add two quick things. No, it's all good. I absolutely love this group of tight ends. I'm super excited about it. I think it's maybe the deepest in the NFL. Also, one thing I noticed during camp, I know Rudolph took a little weight, lost a little weight, I guess, this off season. He looks fast, for as fast as Kyle Rudolph can look. So he looks a little bit quicker, and I'm excited to see what he can bring to the offense with a few less pounds.
Yeah, I think people were a little surprised in that Saints game when Cousins threw back across his body into the middle of the field. Rudolph caught it, and he actually picked up some yards after the catch, like a good amount of yards
right?
after the catch. And he didn't just like turtle up as soon as he got close to a guy. He tried to put a move on someone, and he got a few extra yards by falling forward. So I think if we can see even more of that from Rudolph this year, that would be great. And I don't know if it's because he just isn't fat, like he kind of seems like once he catches the ball, he's had plodding feet in the past, where he takes a few seconds to make any sort of move. But on that one, it looked like he turned and went pretty quick. So maybe it's the loss of the weight, like you said, that's helping him do that.
Yeah, it's got to be, right?
It's got to be. Moving on to the line. Again, I think this one's pretty obvious. Left tackle, Riley Reif, Aviant Collins as his backup. Left guard, you just have Elflein here. Then center, Bradbury, and then Brett Jones. Josh Klein at right guard with Drew Samia backing up. Brian O'Neill at right tackle with Rashad Hill backing up there, but also backing up either side because that's Rashad Hill's thing. What do you guys think of what do you guys think of Elflein's transition over to guard so far this preseason?
He's made some mistakes, and I think people might be overreacting a little bit because we've seen like 20 snaps from him. But when 3 of your 20 snaps are like really bad plays, that's concerning. Maybe he just had like a few bad snaps, or if you have 3 bad snaps over the course of an entire game, like that's one thing. But if you have 3 bad snaps every 20 plays, and so it's like 10 bad snaps a game, then that's a really big problem. So it hasn't looked good, but there's been a lot of positive too, and he's always been kind of an up and down player. So they have had the same 5 guys all through OTA's camp every preseason now. So I'd be surprised if they make a move. I will say Brett Jones looks really good, and obviously it's easier to play center because you're doing mostly double teams in pass protection and in the run game. So it's a little bit of a different transition, but Brett Jones is somebody I think they can really look to if they need to make a move and they don't feel confident about Elflein moving forward. But so far, I haven't seen enough of Elflein to be like, this guy needs to be benched.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is we just haven't seen enough. We'll see a good amount. Hopefully, this third preseason game we'll be able to get some actual idea of whether Elf is ready to play that position or not. And he better be, because I've actually been really impressed with what I've seen from Drew Samia. Now, granted, it's second stringers, and he's looked like he's out there to play and out there to kind of try to get the job.
Yeah, you see the nastiness. You see the attitude with him. He loves finishing guys, which is fun to see because he can't really teach that. So he's a fun player to watch, but he also has like some mistakes that make you go, maybe you're not quite ready to start, but it makes you excited about his future.
Yeah, I think just to have any sort of excitement about the depth on the offensive line is fun for once because we're not just like,
yeah.
who's coming in? God, I really wish they were not coming into the game right now. So, Sean, any thoughts on the offensive line anywhere?
I guess my only thought, I'm actually looking at your depth chart here too, Nick. My only thought was no Danny Isidora or Dakota Dozier at guard, which is a little surprising. Not that I'm saying you're wrong or anything, but they really impressed me throughout training camp, and I I feel like those guys could really help for depth, but they're not really necessarily part of the team's future. So do you have any thoughts on them getting released potentially? I know
it's tough because there are a few different guys who could fill in on the interior positions. I actually don't think Samia is as good right now as Dozier is, but the problem is, you can't stash your 4th round pick on the practice squad or someone will snipe him. So I think Samia stays in for his long-term value to the team. Dozier, I don't think he's kind of a career backup. He has his issues with his form. They've tried him out at left tackle. I think he looks better inside. But he couldn't crack the starting lineup with the Jets last year, who were even worse than the Vikings. So he's not a starting caliber player, in my opinion. I do think they could bump Aviant in if they wanted. He's kind of a wild card because he looked good as like the 6th man in 2017, but he was injured last year. All reports say he's kind of improved a lot and the team's high on him. They could even see him as maybe the future at one of the tackle positions. But, we just haven't really seen him pass protect. Last time we saw him in the 2018 preseason, he just didn't know how to pass protect. It was kind of a mess. So we'll see. Maybe he can fill in. But I think Brett Jones is kind of like the guy for all 3 interior positions going forward if something happens to anybody.
Yeah, it's great to have that versatility out of him. Jones, that is. And just one quick thought, too, that just came into my head. Oli Udo, do you see him being a potential practice squad candidate?
Yeah, he's looked surprisingly good, especially for somebody who was taken at the back end of the 6th round. Somebody who was like it's kind of like a Brian O'Neill situation, except like even more developed, like set your expectations lower because it's a developmental 6th round pick instead of a 2nd rounder. But he was not somebody who was supposed to look anywhere close to being ready. And he, in my opinion, I don't think he's ready to start or anything. He's still kind of some technical issues, but you see really good attitude. I mean, he's pancaking dudes on back-to-back plays, which is, he's playing against guys who aren't going to be playing in the NFL next year probably, but you love to see that no matter what the level of competition is. So I'm excited for him. I saw some people on Twitter who were like, oh, he'll get sniped immediately off the practice squad. I don't think anyone sees him as like able to contribute to their team this year. He's got a lot of technical stuff to clean up, but I do think the team should be excited about where he'll be. So I think you stash him on the practice squad. You think about maybe carrying him as a 10th lineman, but at the same time you've got you've already got 4 tackles, so it's tough to justify a 5th one. So
yeah, especially with like that, like you guys said, the versatility on the inside with Jones. Like you don't really need a 10th lineman. Nick, do we have to let you go here?
Yeah, I'll just say pretty quickly. I think. Vedvik is a better kicker than punter. They should try him out there. I'm not sure that's what they'll do. In fact, from what they've been doing in camp so far, it seems like he might actually be the favorite for the punting job, but maybe that has to do with Matt Wild's injury to his punting thumb or whatever, or maybe that's just a cover-up so that Matt Wild doesn't look bad. I don't know. It's like it's always something with camp, but that's a funny story. The cornerback depth is really bad. They only have 4 guys, and one of them, Mike Hughes, isn't it? It won't be ready to go week 1, so I think they'll be scouring the waiver wire once the final cuts go down to pick up somebody else, maybe like who is that guy they picked up off like the Broncos, or Tremaine Brock, maybe the 49ers, that guy, someone like that, someone they'll bring in to fill in the system, because the depth is pretty shaky. Linebackers have the opposite problem. There's like 7 guys who I think deserve to be on an NFL roster, so it'll be interesting to see how they shake that one down. And then the defensive line, we're kind of set with who we've got. Matafa has that rotational 3rd down pass rusher. Odenabo has made a huge leap from last year. He looks really good as a pass rusher, and is kind of developing beyond just a bull rusher, and is not as much of a liability in run defense as he used to be. And obviously Stephen Weatherly is good enough to start, I think, on some teams. And so the depth there is exciting. Armon Watts is the one name to watch. If they can keep a 10th guy, he's looked really good. So I don't think he'll sneak onto the final 53, but maybe he does because he's had a good showing. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the last guys. I gotta bounce, but good to see you guys.
See you next.
Hey, Nick.
Take care.
All right, so now it is just me and you. So that was the probably the most intelligent part of the show now.
Just me.
So, yeah, I guess we'll just move on. We'll just keep talking about about the roster. We'll go to the defense. Obviously, Nick had his thoughts in there, but who has looked really good for you on the defensive line is what I'll throw out there.
Well, excitingly, I feel like Everson Griffin and Danielle Hunter have looked unbelievable throughout training camp, which isn't really a huge shock. It's just good to see, especially from Griffin. I don't think it's any surprise in Hunter's case, but I'm expecting, a bounce back season from Griffin. Probably double-digit sacks if he stays healthy, and it's great now. Just hearing the news today that both Joseph and Stefan are back in there practicing at full strength. I was quite nervous there for a while with Holmes, Mataafa, Jaleel Johnson inside. As far as defending the rush, I was very nervous with those guys in there. So getting Jones and Stefan back is huge. Like Nick said, I have been very impressed with Armin Watts. I think that's going to be a tough cut if it comes down to it. And slipping him onto the practice squad, I feel like will be really tough. But another guy who I was kind of hesitant at first to even look at, I didn't think he had much of a chance, was Ifadi. Big O. He's really impressed me now that I started actually giving him a chance. He's just been kicking ass throughout OTAs, from what I hear, and then from what I've seen in training camp, he's looked really good. So I feel like he'll definitely make the team as a depth end, as a pass rusher. And Simmer said yesterday he's also taking reps on the inside as well, which he may or may not do, but it kind of tells you what the team sees in him. So those are a few guys that have stood out to me.
Yeah, it's always good to hear that like the outside guys are learning how to play inside, so that if push comes to shove, you can always slide somebody inside to help you out. I know Brian Robeson did that a lot towards the end of his career, where he was an inside guy on a good amount of the plays that he played. But to hear that Everson Griffin is doing well and looking good is like, it's incredibly like relieving to me, because I think a lot of people have just kind of written him off already. Like, as much as like we know Everson is this incredible player, this incredible athlete who always like essentially turns the doubt away, other than last season where he kind of had a lost season with the mental health issues and everything. Like, to hear he is essentially the leader on that defense, and to hear that he's doing well and is going to be in there and playing, even if he's not playing to his elite level that he has been before. I mean, if he gets 10 sacks and plays a good amount of the snaps, I think the defense will be vastly improved because of it. And I think you also touched on seeing Linval Joseph and Shamar Stephen being back. That's incredibly important. I know I've seen a lot of talk about, is our run defense going to be okay? Like, how are we going to stop anybody if they just want to run on us? Because these first 2 preseason games, they've done it all over, and I'm just like, well, but you're missing Shamar Stephen and Linval Joseph, who are your 2 best linemen. You're expecting Jalen Holmes and Jaleel Johnson to just step up and stop everybody, especially when we face 2 very good offenses. Like, when the first team offensive for both the Saints and the Seahawks were in, they are 2 very good offenses with very good running games. The Seahawks were the best in the league last year, so I don't know. There's a lot of overreaction in preseason. I don't think it's time to overreact with the defensive tackles just yet.
Oh, man, I almost overreacted today when I saw Mike Boone is leading the NFL in preseason rushing. But I had to remind myself it's still a preseason.
It is still the preseason, but that doesn't mean it's not super, super exciting. Moving on to the linebackers, we've seen some really good things, I think, this preseason from who else? Eric Wilson, I think, has done an exceptional job, but I think that's not even unexpected at this point, because I think he could be a starting linebacker on a lot of teams. I think he just gets pushed out because of, Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks are just so good.
Yeah, he has looked good to me in training camp as well. His pass coverage was just phenomenal. I saw him deflect a few passes that were intended for Irv Smith Jr., so that gives you an idea of his speed and what he can do in coverage. So it's a deep linebacker group, which is both good and bad. in my eyes, it's kind of bittersweet. You obviously love to have good linebackers, but in this defense, which a lot of the times is basing in nickel, you only got 2 linebackers on the field, so it's going to be a little conflicting. I feel like once it comes to roster cut downs, what's going to happen there? Do you keep 6 linebackers basically between Barr, Kendricks, Wilson, Cameron Smith, Kentrell Brothers, and Ben Gideon? So I don't know. It should be interesting.
Yeah, it should be. It should really be. I think Cameron Smith is another one that has kind of surprised me, but only because I was not happy with the pick at the time. But I think that's because the Jets sniped the Minnesota boy that I think I really wanted. Yeah, Blake Cashman. All right, now moving to what I think is going to be the kind of the thorn in the Vikings side for the first at least 8 weeks of the season. The defensive backs are just going to be. I don't think we'll see as good of a pass defense. I don't think we'll see as aggressive as one. I think we'll see a lot of vanilla coverage, essentially don't get beat, damage control kind of defense out of these defensive backs. So I don't think we'll see quite the Zimmer scheme that we're used to. But obviously we got Xavier Rhodes, Trey Waynes. They're both locked in. Mike Hughes is set to return, but with an injury like that, coming back, he'll be probably limited. And then after that, it's with Holden Hill being suspended. You got Mac Alexander's going to play the nickel. That's not really in question. But after that, it's really anybody could be in there and could be trying to make a difference or making boneheaded plays and costing us games. And I don't know who's going to be that fifth cornerback. Nick's got Ben Wicari here. He's got as good a shot as anybody. I don't really know anything about the guy. The only one that I saw that even somewhat made any sort of impact on me was the guy who had the interception in the first game against the Saints, and he literally just was in the right place at the right time on that play, and then I saw him make a good play on a swing pass where he broke down and made a nice tackle. And outside of that, I have no idea. With the depth defensive backs, I don't know who's going to make it. I don't know who's good.
Yeah, that was Nate. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Nate Metters or Nate Meters.
Yeah. And
that was, honestly, I'd seen nothing in my time at training camp from him up to that point. So it's obviously good to see a guy making a flashy play. Will it propel him to a practice squad spot? Maybe, but most likely not. You never really know how the roster will shake out. But, yeah, you're right. After the top 3 guys, it's wide open, like Zimmer said yesterday. You have to get Waynes and Rhodes, who, I went to the game Sunday night, and season ticket holder there, one thing him and I talked about was last year he was very disappointed in the coverage from Rhodes and Waynes. He thought it was very subpar. So, like Griffin, I'm kind of expecting a bounce-back year from those guys. I know Rhodes was kind of dealing with injuries most of the year. And Waynes, I thought, I didn't watch him that closely, but I thought he had a better year than, what his PFF score would suggest. Either way, I'm expecting a bounce-back year from those guys. And Mac, I know Zimmer had talked about Mac Alexander playing both inside and outside, which should give them a little versatility when it comes to cornerback. And you might see guys like Jaron Kearse and possibly Marcus Epps, if he makes the team, playing a little nickel or slot corner. So that'll help a little while. But like Nick talked about earlier, I could see that picking up a veteran corner who's released come roster cuts.
Yeah, I think there's no question. There's no question that every single week they'll be scouring the waivers and scouring who's still available. I think he made a very good point. Freeing up Tremaine Brock was another pickup that we made. That, I mean, he wasn't flashy, he wasn't exciting, but he played some good snaps for the team, and I don't know, just he was a solid veteran. That's about all you can ask for after Rhodes and Waynes who are like elite guys, and Alexander, well, should be elite guys. Make sure I hedge the bets on that one. And then Mac Alexander, who's a very good, if nothing else, nickel corner who can also, has worked some outside. But I think you mentioned Jaron Kearse. I think he's a name that, like, people don't expect to be as good as he has been this preseason. Granted, he's been doing it against second teamers, but he's been up into pretty much every play, and, like, I don't know, he reminded me a lot of Harrison Smith just with the second team, getting in there, getting into the backfield and wreaking havoc. But I don't think he has the coverage skills that Smith has in any sort of, he's nowhere close, I guess, is what I'm going to say in coverage skills. But I've been impressed with him, and especially his intensity and his ability to get up there and mix it up with the run.
I'd say, yeah, I totally agree, and I'm super excited for Jaron Kearse, and that goes back to basically everything I've seen in training camp. All the way back to when he was drafted. I've always been excited for him, but now I feel like he's confident in not only his own abilities, but the fact that he's familiar with the Zimmer defense now, and he knows where to be. And when you're 6'3", 6'4", he looks like a giant out there. You don't necessarily have to be, elite in coverage. If you're that big and you're in the right spot, you're going to make it really tough on the opposing quarterback, and you might pick off some balls too. So does he have the speed to cover slot guys? That's another question. But I feel like he's super aggressive when he blitzes, like we saw the other night. And, he's hungry. Like somebody said, he looks hungry. So I'm excited to see what he can do this year.
He looks like he is ready to play. We'll just oh yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, has anybody heard from Terrence Newman? Is he like legit retired? He might be an emergency option.
I think Terrence Newman, since he hasn't been on the coaching staff and he is, I think, potentially eligible, I think Newman would be a phone call away if the Vikings won, personally. But
hey,
I think he's the emergency option, the last resort. Just to touch on real quick, Nick already touched on a little bit, but special teams. We saw Vedvik, do his thing this week. I agree with him. I think he outkicked his coverage a lot on punts. I don't think he's a punter. I don't think he's going to be the full-time punter. But I think he definitely has a chance to push Dan Bailey from his kicker spot. I don't know. To me, keeping Dan Bailey doesn't make any sense because he's been mediocre at best for the last, year for you. He doesn't have any upside anymore because he's had these issues for long enough that he doesn't look like he's going to turn back into the elite kicker that he was in Dallas. So to me, it just doesn't make sense to hold on to him and not move ahead with a guy who's going to give you probably about the same completion rating, at minimum, and then he's also younger and he's got all this potential. Plus, he can punt if you need him to. I think it's a no-brainer to me to cut Dan Bailey, but I don't know if you're a big Dan Bailey fan or not.
Well, yeah, it's kind of interesting that both you and Nick feel that way. I guess I see it not really opposite, but I see it differently. As Vedvik taking over as punter, while Bailey, a more kind of established veteran, sticks around as kicker. Not that I want him to, but I feel like he does bring value at extra points. The guy is pretty good. I think he's like 99% even, with extra points, even with him moving back. So I think that's where he can, like I said, bring some value to the team, whereas Vedvik can be brought in for the longer kicks. You have a little versatility there. Personally, I'd love to see Vedvik do all of that, but Marwan Malouf said today, actually, that he kind of foresees that as being an issue. He said in pregame, there's just not enough time for one person to go through all the warm-ups and all the motions. So I thought that was interesting that he said that. So he won't be able to do it all from the sounds of it. It'll be kind of a more limited role, but I see him Fedvik as the punter, Dan Bailey is the place kicker, and mainly for extra points and shorter field goals. So that's just how I feel right now. That could obviously change, but I am curious though. Why do you guys see, or I should say this, Nick's got Fedvik and Weil on the team. Do you see Dan Bailey getting cut and then the Vikings keeping a Weil and Fedvik?
Yeah, that's the way I would see it personally. Okay. Is cutting. I actually have it exactly how Nick has it here, where they cut Dan Bailey, they keep Fedvik, they have Weil punt, and then they use Chad Beebe as the holder. I don't know.
I mean, what?
Yeah,
Weil has looked good. From what I've seen, he hasn't looked bad at all in training camp. So I wouldn't be upset with that at all.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything. Nothing would shock me at this point with how it shakes out. I guess the only thing that would shock me a little bit is if they just straight out cut Fedvik, but only because they moved a 5th rounder for him. Like, that's the only reason that it would surprise me at all. But I think it's kind of an interesting situation that, like, you don't really see it very often where a guy has a chance to make the roster, a special teams roster, as like one of two. Like, he could make it in either position, or they could go completely, I think, stupid in my mind and try to have him do both. I think it's interesting. It's added a layer of intrigue to this Vikings preseason that we did not need. But yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, I think we ran through pretty much everything. I think we're gonna wrap it up here just because I gotta go. I got family things to do. But we'll be back after this next week after we play the Arizona Cardinals. We get our first semi game. Get to see Kyler Murray, who I am convinced will bust.
Oh, interesting.
That's been my take since the beginning on him. So
he's got a big test on a Saturday.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll see what the first team offense can bring, especially in the run game. I think that's really where the preseason you can actually get a feel for, because I think Kirk Cousins, Adam Thielen, and Stephon Diggs are going to come up and they're going to essentially shred any vanilla defense that they see most of the time, I think. So I think looking at the linemen, looking at the blocking schemes, watching the running backs, that's really where it gets interesting, watching the first team. And then once they're out, that's where the real preseason action starts. Even though these games don't matter, the score doesn't matter, there's still a lot to watch. But we have been About the Labor. I have been your newest host, Kirby O'Connor. Again, managed editor of PurplePTSD.com. PurplePTSD.com has new functionality. We got our message boards up. Come join the forum, the conversation, introduce yourself, complain, be optimistic, be pessimistic, do whatever you want, obviously within reason. So yeah, that's it. This has been About the Labor. Joining me as I think is going to be always Sean Borman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this has been fun. I'm looking forward to it next week. Let's go Vikings, and let's beat Kyler Murray.
Absolutely. Skol.
Skol.
Summer's almost over, but at Old Navy the styles are as hot as ever. Get to Old Navy now for 30% off all jeans, 40% off all dresses, and 50% off all tees. That's right, get 30, 40, and 50% off all your favorite styles for the whole family, plus up to 75% off clearance. Hurry in fast. These deals won't last. The sale ends soon at Old Navy and OldNavy.com. Valid in-store 8/22 to 8/28 and online 8/22 to 8/24. Excludes in-store clearance, bubbles, active, licensed, and men's package tees. Summer's almost over, but at Old Navy the styles are as hot as ever. Get to Old Navy now for 30% off all jeans, 40% off all dresses, and 50% off all tees. That's right, get 30, 40, and 50% off all your favorite styles for the whole family, plus up to 75% off clearance. Hurry in fast. These deals won't last. The sale ends soon at Old Navy and OldNavy.com. Valid in-store 8/22 to 8/28 and online 8/22 to 8/24. Excludes in-store clearance, bubbles, active, licensed, and men's package tees.